The rope sang through the air like a rattlesnake's warning, and Nora Sinclair had exactly 3 heartbeats left before the quicksand pulled her under completely. She'd been crossing what looked like a harmless dry creek bed just north of Pioche, Nevada, her wagon hitched a half-mile back where the ground was solid. The September heat of 1876 had baked the earth into deceptive patterns, and what appeared to be cracked mud had given way beneath her boots the moment she stepped into the creek's lowest point. Now the wet sand gripped her legs like iron hands, pulling her down inch by terrible inch while her heart hammered against her ribs. Nora clawed at the surface, her fingers finding nothing but more slick sand that offered no purchase. The late afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, turning her panic into something sharp and metallic in her mouth. She opened her lips to scream, but terror had stolen her voice. Her chest constricted as the sand crept up past her knees, past her thighs, and she knew with absolute certainty that she was about to die alone in the Nevada desert, 23 years old, and barely started on the life she had planned. Then the rope landed across her shoulders with perfect precision. "Don't fight it," a voice commanded from somewhere above her, deep and steady as mountain stone. "Wrap the rope under your arms. Do it now." Nora's shaking hands obeyed before her mind could catch up, fumbling the rough hemp around her torso and tucking it beneath her armpits. The moment she had it secured, the rope went taut, and she felt herself being pulled upward with tremendous force. The quicksand made obscene sucking sounds as it fought to keep its prize, but whoever held the other end of that rope was stronger than the earth itself. Her legs came free with a wet pop, and suddenly she was being dragged across the surface of the creek bed, her body leaving a trail in the sand until she reached solid ground. She lay there gasping, her whole body trembling, mud coating her dress from breast to boots. "You hurt?" The voice belonged to a man who now crouched beside her, and when Nora finally looked up, her breath caught for an entirely different reason. He was enormous, built like the mountains themselves, with shoulders broad enough to block out the sun. Dark hair fell past his collar, slightly unkempt, and a thick beard covered his jaw. His eyes were an unusual shade of gray-green, like sage after rain, and they studied her with an intensity that made her feel exposed despite being fully clothed. His hands, still holding the rope, were scarred and calloused, the hands of a man who lived by his strength and wits. He wore buckskin and wool, practical clothing that had seen hard use, and a knife hung from his belt alongside other tools she could not name. I said, "Are you hurt?" he repeated, his brow furrowing slightly. "No," Nora managed, her voice coming out scratchy. "No, I don't think so. Just frightened half to death." Something that might have been the ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Better half than all the way. Can you stand?" He offered her a hand, and she took it, feeling the raw power in his grip as he pulled her to her feet as easily as lifting a child. Her legs shook beneath her, weak from fear and the exertion of fighting the quicksand. When she swayed, his other hand came up to steady her elbow. "Easy now. Your body's had a shock. Give yourself a minute." Nora nodded, concentrating on breathing, on convincing her heart to slow its frantic pace. Now that she was standing, she could see his horse, a sturdy gray gelding, standing patiently about 20 yards away. The man must have been riding past when he spotted her predicament. "Thank you," she said, looking up at him. He had to be at least 6.5 feet tall, making her feel impossibly small, despite her own above-average height. "You saved my life. I would have died if you had not come along." "Probably," he agreed, coiling his rope with efficient movements. "What were you doing trying to cross there?" "I thought it was dry. It looked dry from my wagon." She gestured vaguely in the direction she had come from. "I was trying to find a faster route to Pioche. The main road has been washed out from the storms last week." He grunted, a sound that could have meant anything. "Creek beds are dangerous even when they look dry. Flash floods leave pockets of sand that never fully drain. You traveling alone?" "Yes." The admission felt dangerous somehow, though she could not say why. "My father died 3 months ago. I'm coming to Pioche to stay with my aunt, my mother's sister. She runs a boarding house there." The man's eyes flickered with something she could not read. "Long way to travel by yourself?" "I did not have much choice in the matter. Our farm was foreclosed on after my father passed. Everything we had went to pay his debts." The words came out more bitter than she intended, and she pressed her lips together, angry at herself for sharing so much with a stranger. But he only nodded as if he understood exactly what she meant. "I will take you back to your wagon, make sure everything is sound, then I will show you the safe way into town." "You do not have to do that. You have already done more than enough." It was not a request. He said it mildly enough, but there was steel underneath the words. "Name is Hank Keller. I have a claim up in the mountains, but I know this territory better than most. And I do not make a habit of saving women from quicksand just to let them break their necks falling down a ravine on the way to town." Despite everything, Nora felt a smile tug at her mouth. Nora Sinclair. And I suppose I cannot argue with that logic. "Did not figure you could." He whistled, and his horse came trotting over, well-trained and responsive. "You able to ride, or do you need to sit a while longer?" "I can ride." Pride made her stand straighter, though her legs still felt like water. Hank swung into the saddle with an ease that spoke of a lifetime in the wilderness, then reached down for her. "Give me your hand." She did, and he lifted her up behind him as though she weighed nothing at all, settling her sideways across the horse's rump. "Hold on to me. Do not be shy about it. I would rather you wrinkle my shirt than fall off." Nora wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid muscle of his torso beneath the worn fabric. He was warm despite the cooling evening air, and she could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. The horse started forward at his gentle urging, and they rode in silence toward where she had left her wagon. The sun was sinking lower now, painting the desert in shades of gold and amber. Nora's dress was still wet with mud, and she could feel it drying stiff and uncomfortable against her skin, but she was alive. The reality of how close she had come to death kept washing over her in cold waves, making her tighten her grip on Hank's waist. "You all right back there?" he asked without turning around. "Yes, just thinking about what almost happened." "Do not." His voice was firm. "It did not happen. You are safe now. No use dwelling on what ifs." Simple words, but they steadied her somehow. They rode on, and within minutes her wagon came into view, exactly where she had left it. Her mare stood patiently in her traces, unconcerned by the drama that had unfolded. Hank dismounted and helped Nora down, then walked around the wagon, checking the wheels and the harness with a practiced eye. "Everything looks sound. You have supplies?" "Enough to get me to town, I hope. Water, some food, blankets." He checked her water barrel, his expression darkening slightly. "This is almost empty. How long have you been traveling?" 5 days since I left the last town. I thought I had enough, but the heat has been worse than I expected." Hank went to his horse and returned with a canteen, which he used to refill her barrel from a larger container tied to his saddle. "You need to drink more in this climate, not less. Desert will kill you faster than quicksand if you let yourself get dried out." "I was trying to conserve it." "Nearly killed yourself doing it." He capped the barrel and looked at her seriously. "You are not in farm country anymore, Miss Sinclair. Different rules out here. You listen to me, and you will make it to Pioche alive. You ignore me, and you will end up buzzard food. Understood?" His bluntness should have offended her, but instead, Nora found it oddly reassuring. There was no false politeness in this man, no sweet words designed to manipulate. He said exactly what he meant, and she suspected he meant exactly what he said. "Understood," she agreed. "Good. Now, the road into Pioche from this direction is not too bad if you know where you are going, but it is getting dark, and you are in no condition to travel tonight. We will make camp here, and I will take you in at first light." "We?" Nora felt her eyebrows rise. "Mr. Keller, I appreciate everything you have done, but I cannot possibly ask you to stay out here on my account." "You are not asking. I am telling you how this is going to work." He was already unsaddling his horse, his movements efficient and practiced. "You think I am going to ride off and leave a woman alone in the desert after dark? What kind of man do you take me for?" "An honorable one, clearly," Nora said quietly. "But people will talk if they find out we spent the night together unchaperoned." Hank snorted. "Let them talk. I will sleep on the other side of the fire, and your virtue will be as safe as if you were locked in a church. But your life will not be safe if I leave you out here alone, and I value the second a whole lot more than the first." Heat flooded Nora's cheeks, though she could not entirely say whether it was from embarrassment or something else. "You are very direct, Mr. Keller." Life is too short to be anything else. He finished with his horse and started gathering wood for a fire. You have any food that needs cooking, or are you living on hardtack and jerky? I have some beans and a little bacon. That will do. You get cleaned up while I get this fire going. There's a rock formation about 50 yards that way that will give you some privacy. Take your canteen and wash the mud off before it dries completely. Trust me, it will itch something fierce if you leave it. Nora did as he suggested, grateful for the chance to compose herself away from those two observant eyes. The rocks created a natural shelter, and she used the precious water to scrub the worst of the mud from her legs and arms. Her dress was likely ruined, but she had another in the wagon that would have to serve until she reached town. When she returned, Hank had a fire going and was setting up a crude spit for cooking. He had changed his shirt, she noticed, though she could not imagine when he had found the time. "Better?" he asked, glancing at her. "Much. Thank you." They worked together to prepare the simple meal, Nora setting the beans to heat while Hank sliced the bacon. The domesticity of it felt strange after so many days alone on the trail, and stranger still given that she had only met this man an hour ago. Yet there was something comfortable about his presence, something that made her feel safer than she had since leaving home. "Your aunt expecting you?" Hank asked as they ate, the fire crackling between them. "Yes, though I am not sure exactly when. I sent her a letter before I left, but mail service being what it is, I have no idea if she received it." "What is her name? I might know her. Pioche is not that big a town." "Sarah Montgomery. She's been running her boarding house for about 5 years, I think." Recognition lit Hank's eyes. "I know her. Good woman, fair and honest, which is saying something in a mining town. She will be glad to have family with her. Lost her husband to a mining accident a few years back." "I did not know that." Nora felt a pang of guilt. She barely knew her aunt, had only met her a handful of times when she was a child. "My mother and she were not close. They had some kind of falling out before I was born." "Families are complicated," Hank said simply, "but Sarah is kind. She will take you in and treat you well. You could do worse for a fresh start." "Is that what you are doing out here? Looking for a fresh start?" His eyes met hers across the fire, and for a moment she thought he might not answer. Then he leaned back, stretching his long legs toward the warmth. "Something like that. I came west after the war, looking for a place that did not have so many ghosts. Found my way to these mountains and decided they suited me fine." "The war?" Nora did not have to ask which one. The scars of the Civil War were still fresh on the nation, though more than a decade had passed since its end. "Which side did you fight for?" "The side that lost." He said it without bitterness, simply stating a fact. "I was 17 when it started, 21 when it ended. Spent the best years of my youth killing men I had no real quarrel with. When it was over, I could not go back home. Too many memories, too much death. So I kept moving west until I found a place where I could breathe again." The pain in his words was carefully controlled, but Nora heard it anyway. "I'm sorry. That must have been terrible." "It was a long time ago." He stood, brushing off his pants. "You should get some rest. We will leave at dawn, and it's a few hours' ride to town. I will take first watch." "Watch? Are we in danger?" "Probably not, but I do not take chances, and neither should you. This is wild country, Miss Sinclair. Animals, bandits, all manner of things that can hurt you. I will keep the fire going and make sure nothing bothers you while you sleep." Nora wanted to argue, wanted to insist that he should rest too, but the exhaustion was catching up with her. The fear, the near-death experience, the strange comfort of this man's presence, it all weighed on her like a physical thing. She made her bed in the wagon, curling up under her blankets with the canvas cover over her head, and despite her certainty that she would lie awake all night, sleep claimed her almost immediately. She woke once in the deep hours of the night, stirred by the sound of Hank's voice singing softly. It was a sad song, something about lost love and long roads, and his voice was surprisingly good, a rich baritone that carried in the still air. Nora lay listening until the song ended, then drifted back to sleep with the feeling that she was safer than she had been in months. Dawn came with startling suddenness, the sky going from black to gray to blazing orange in what felt like moments. Nora emerged from the wagon to find Hank already up and moving, the fire stoked and coffee brewing. Morning, he greeted her, handing her a tin cup. We have got about 3 hours of good traveling before the heat gets bad. You ready to see Pioche? As ready as I will ever be, I suppose. They broke camp efficiently, Hank helping her hitch her mare properly and checking every strap and buckle before declaring her wagon fit for travel. Then he mounted his gelding and took the lead, guiding them along a route that wound through the rocky terrain with deceptive ease. As they rode, Hank pointed out landmarks and warned her of dangers. See that type of rock formation? Means there might be a water source nearby. And those plants there, the ones with the white flowers, their roots are edible if you boil them long enough. Good to know if you ever run short on supplies. You know this land very well, Nora observed. I have had 5 years to learn it. And before that I spent time in the Rockies, the Sierras. You live in wild country long enough, you either learn to read it or you die. It must be lonely, though, living up in the mountains by yourself. He was quiet for a moment, and she thought perhaps she had overstepped. Then he shrugged. It suits me. I do not mind my own company, and I come down to town when I need supplies or human conversation. It is enough. But there was something in his voice, some note that made Nora think perhaps it was not quite enough after all. Before she could pursue the thought, they crested a rise, and Pioche spread out below them. The town clung to the hillside like a determined barnacle, a collection of wooden buildings and tents that somehow managed to look both permanent and temporary at the same time. Smoke rose from chimneys, and even from this distance Nora could hear the sounds of industry, the rumble and crash of mining operations, the shouts of men, the general chaos of a boomtown in full swing. There she is, Hank said. Pioche, Nevada, richest silver strike in the territory and the wildest town to match. Your aunt's boarding house is on the north end, the quieter side. I will take you straight there. They descended into town, and Nora tried not to stare at the rough-looking men who lined the streets, at the saloons that seemed to outnumber every other type of business, at the general air of barely controlled mayhem. She had grown up in a small farming community where everyone knew everyone else, and this felt like stepping into a different world entirely. Hank led her through the main street and up a side road where the buildings were slightly more respectable. He stopped in front of a 2-story wooden structure with a sign that read, Montgomery's boarding house, hanging over the door. This is it, he said, dismounting. He came to help Nora down from her wagon, his hands steady on her waist. You will be all right here. Sarah runs a tight ship, keeps the rougher element out, and if you need anything, my claim is about 6 miles northeast up in the hills. Anyone in town can tell you how to find it. Thank you, Mr. Keller. Nora looked up at him, realizing that she did not want him to leave, which was absurd given that she had only known him for less than a day. I truly do not know how to repay you for what you have done. No need. His gray-green eyes were serious. You just take care of yourself, Miss Sinclair, and stay away from creek beds that look too dry. A smile tugged at her lips despite herself. I will remember that. He tipped his hat to her and swung back onto his horse, and Nora watched him ride away, feeling strangely bereft. Then she squared her shoulders, climbed the steps to the boarding house, and knocked on the door. It opened almost immediately, revealing a woman in her early 50s with graying brown hair and sharp blue eyes that reminded Nora painfully of her mother. Yes? Aunt Sarah? I am Nora Sinclair, your niece. The woman's eyes went wide, and then her whole face transformed with a smile. Nora, oh my dear child, you made it. I got your letter just yesterday and have been beside myself, wondering when you would arrive. Come in, come in. She was pulled into a warm embrace that smelled of bread and lavender, and for the first time since her father's death, Nora felt the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. She was safe. She had made it. Over the next few days, Nora settled into life at the boarding house. Sarah put her to work immediately, which Nora appreciated. She needed something to occupy her hands and mind, something to keep her from dwelling on all she had lost. She cooked, cleaned, changed linens, and helped serve meals to the boarders, most of whom were miners or prospectors passing through. They were rough men, by and large, but they treated her with a courtesy that surprised her. Sarah's rules were strict: no drinking in the house, no fighting, and no improper behavior toward the women, and the men seemed to respect them. Or perhaps they simply feared Sarah, who, despite her kind nature, could turn formidable when crossed. But no matter how busy Nora kept herself, her thoughts kept drifting back to Hank Keller. She would find herself wondering what he was doing up in his mountain claim, whether he was eating properly, whether he was lonely. It was foolish, she told herself. She barely knew the man. He had done her a kindness, nothing more. Yet she could not forget the way his hands had felt, strong and sure, pulling her from the quicksand. Could not forget his voice in the night, singing that sad song. Could not forget the way he had looked at her, with an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. "You are distracted today," Sarah observed one morning as they prepared breakfast. "Is something troubling you?" "No, I'm fine. Just wool gathering." Sarah gave her a knowing look. "It would not have anything to do with Hank Keller, would it? I heard he was the one who brought you to town." Nora felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He saved my life. I got caught in quicksand crossing a creek bed, and he pulled me out." "Did he now?" Sarah's eyes were thoughtful. "That sounds like Hank. He's always been one to help those in need. He is a good man, though most folks around here do not know what to make of him." "What do you mean?" "He keeps to himself mostly. Comes to town for supplies maybe once a month, sells his silver ore, and then disappears back into the mountains. Polite enough when spoken to, but he does not seek out company. Some of the miners think he is odd, but I have always found him perfectly decent." Sarah paused, measuring flour into a bowl. "He lost a lot in the war, I think. Some men come back from something like that and they cannot quite fit back into normal life. He told me he fought for the Confederacy." "That is right. And out here, most folks do not care one way or the other which side a man fought for, as long as he does not cause trouble. But Hank, he has ghosts. You can see it in his eyes sometimes." Sarah looked at Nora directly. "Why are you asking about him, dear?" "I do not know," Nora admitted. "I just keep thinking about him, wondering if he is all right up there by himself." "Well, if you are that curious, you could always take him some of those preserves we made yesterday, as a thank you for saving your life. It would be the neighborly thing to do." The suggestion made Nora's heart skip. "I could not possibly. It would not be proper for me to visit a man at his claim. Who is going to know? And even if someone did find out, you are bringing him a gift to thank him for saving your life. Perfectly reasonable." Sarah's eyes twinkled. "Besides, you are a grown woman, Nora, not a girl fresh out of the schoolroom. You are allowed to make your own choices about who you see and where you go." The idea took root in Nora's mind and would not leave. By the end of the week, she had made up her mind. She packed a basket with jars of preserves, fresh bread, and some of the cookies she had baked that morning, borrowed one of Sarah's horses, and got directions to Hank's claim from a miner who seemed to know the area. The ride up into the hills was beautiful in the early morning light. September in Nevada meant cooler temperatures as autumn approached, and the air smelled of sage and juniper. Nora followed the trail the miner had described, winding up through rocky terrain until she reached a small valley nestled between two ridges. Hank's claim was more substantial than she had expected. There was a cabin, small but well built, with a stone chimney and real glass windows. A lean-to stable housed his horse, and various mining equipment was neatly organized near the entrance to what must be his mine shaft. It looked like the home of a man who intended to stay, not just a temporary camp. Hank himself was working outside, stripped to the waist despite the cool air, swinging a pickaxe at a stubborn boulder. His back was to her, and Nora had a moment to appreciate the play of muscles under sun-bronzed skin, the sheer power in each swing of the tool. Sweat gleamed on his shoulders, and his long hair was tied back with a leather cord. Then his horse nickered a greeting to her borrowed mount, and Hank spun around, the pickaxe coming up defensively before he recognized her. The weapon lowered immediately, but his expression was wary. "Miss Sinclair, this is unexpected." Nora suddenly felt very foolish, sitting there on a borrowed horse with her basket of baked goods, like some character from a children's story. "I apologize for arriving unannounced. I wanted to bring you a proper thank you for saving my life. My aunt and I made preserves, and I thought you might enjoy them." For a long moment, Hank just looked at her, his expression unreadable. Then he set down the pickaxe and reached for the shirt he had draped over a nearby rock, shrugging into it. "That was kind of you, but you did not need to ride all the way up here. You could have left them in town." "I wanted to see you." The words came out before she could stop them, honest and raw. "I wanted to make sure you were all right." Something shifted in his eyes, a crack in that careful guard he kept up. You wanted to make sure I was all right? Is that so strange? You helped me, and then you just rode away. I've been wondering about you. Hank was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was rough. You should not have come here, Nora. It was the first time he had used her given name, and the sound of it on his lips sent warmth through her chest. Why not? Because this is not proper. Because people will talk. Because... He stopped, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. Because I have been thinking about you too, and that is not a good thing for either of us. Nora dismounted, leaving the basket tied to the saddle. She walked toward him slowly, her heart pounding. Why is it not a good thing? Because I am not the kind of man you should be interested in. I live alone in the mountains, Nora. I have nothing to offer except a hard life and a man with more ghosts than future. His eyes were intense on hers. You deserve better than that. Should I not be the judge of what I deserve? You have only been in town for a week. You do not know me. You do not know what I am. Then tell me. She stopped in front of him, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his gray-green eyes, close enough to smell the clean sweat and soap scent of him. Tell me what you are, Hank Keller. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war happening behind his eyes, the battle between pushing her away and pulling her close. I am a man who has killed more people than he can count. I am a man who sometimes still wakes up at night hearing the screams of the dying. I am a man who came to these mountains to escape his past and found that you cannot outrun the things you carry inside you. I am a woman who watched her father die slowly over 2 years, unable to afford the medicine that might have saved him, Nora replied quietly. I am a woman who lost her home, her family, everything she had ever known. I am a woman who nearly died alone in the desert and was saved by a stranger who asked nothing in return. We all have pain, Hank. We all have things we carry. That does not make us unworthy of happiness. Nora. Her name was half prayer, half protest. She reached up and laid her hand against his bearded cheek, feeling him tense under her touch. I'm not asking you to marry me or make me promises. I'm just asking you to let me know you. Is that so terrible? You do not know what you are asking. Then show me. The words hung between them for a heartbeat, and then Hank's control broke. He pulled her to him, one arm banding around her waist while his other hand came up to cup the back of her head, and he kissed her with a hunger that stole her breath. Nora had been kissed before, chased pecks from boys back home, but this was something entirely different. This was need and longing and a desperation that matched the ache in her own chest. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, even though there was no space left between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Hank rested his forehead against hers. This is madness. Perhaps, but I do not care. You should, I should. But even as he said it, he was not letting her go. If you keep coming up here, people will talk. Let them talk. I am tired of living my life according to what other people think I should do. Nora pulled back enough to look at him seriously. Unless you do not want me to come. If that is the case, tell me now, and I will leave and not bother you again. Not want you? A harsh laugh escaped him. Nora, wanting you is the only thing I have been able to think about for the past week. But wanting something and it being good for you are two different things. I am a grown woman, Hank. I can decide what is good for me. He searched her eyes, looking for doubt, for hesitation. Whatever he found there must have satisfied him, because he nodded slowly. All right. If you are sure about this, if you are really sure, then yes. Come visit me. Let me get to know you properly. But I will not have people talking about you like you are some loose woman, so we keep it quiet. Agreed. Agreed. They stood there for a moment longer, wrapped in each other's arms, and then Hank stepped back, visibly pulling himself together. You brought food? Preserves, bread, and cookies. Then let me make us some coffee, and you can tell me what you have been doing all week while we eat. I might not be much for society, but I remember how to be a host. They spent the rest of the morning together, sitting on the porch of his cabin, drinking coffee and talking. Hank told her about his claim, about the silver he was pulling from the mountain, about his plans to expand his operation. Nora told him about life at the boarding house, about getting to know her aunt, about the strange, rough energy of Pioche. It felt natural, easy in a way that made Nora realize how rare such comfort was. With Hank, she did not have to pretend to be anything other than what she was. He did not expect her to be delicate or fragile, did not treat her like she might break. He spoke to her like an equal, listened when she talked, and made her laugh with dry observations about the absurdities of mining town life. When the sun reached its zenith, Nora knew she needed to get back before Sarah started to worry. Hank walked her to her horse, helped her mount, and looked up at her with an expression that made her heart flutter. "Come back," he said simply. "Whenever you can. I will be here." "I will." She rode back to town with a lightness in her chest she had not felt in years, and if Sarah noticed her good mood, she was kind enough not to comment on it directly. Over the following weeks, Nora found reasons to ride up to Hank's claim 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes she brought food, sometimes just herself. They would spend hours together, talking, working side by side on small projects around his cabin, or simply sitting in comfortable silence while he taught her about the mountains and she taught him about the books she loved to read. He was different when they were alone, more relaxed, quicker to smile. He told her stories about his time in the war that he swore he had never told anyone else, and she shared her fears about the future, about whether she would ever truly feel at home in this wild place. "You will," Hank assured her one afternoon as they sat by the small stream that ran near his cabin. "This land has a way of getting into your blood. Give it time." "Is that what happened to you?" "Something like that. I came here running from ghosts, but somewhere along the way I stopped running and started living. The mountains gave me that." Nora leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling his arm come around her naturally. "I am glad they did. Otherwise, I never would have met you. Best thing that Quicksand ever did, catching you like that." She laughed and swatted his chest. "You are terrible. You like it. Unfortunately, I do." As October arrived and the aspens turned gold in the high country, their relationship deepened. Hank kissed her often now, long, slow kisses that made her forget her own name, but he was always respectful, always careful not to push for more than she was ready to give. It made her want him all the more, this restraint, this proof that he valued her above his own desires. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple, Nora worked up the courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind for weeks. "Hank, where's this going? Between us, I mean." He was quiet for a long moment, his arm tightening around her shoulders. "Where do you want it to go?" "I want it to go everywhere. I want mornings and evenings and all the moments in between. I want to know that this is not just something temporary, something that will fade when the novelty wears off." "Nora." He turned to face her fully, his eyes serious in the fading light. "I am not a man who knows how to do things halfway. When I commit to something, I commit fully. But I need to know that you understand what you would be getting into. My life is not easy. I live up here in the mountains, miles from town. I work hard, and the winters are brutal. There are no fancy dresses or social gatherings or any of the things a woman might want. I do not want those things. I want you. You say that now, but what about in 5 years? 10? When you are stuck up here with only me for company and the nearest neighbor is hours away? Then I will be exactly where I want to be." Nora took his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "I am not some delicate flower who needs constant entertainment, Hank. I grew up on a farm, working from dawn to dusk. I know what hard work looks like, and I would rather have a hard life with you than an easy one without you." Something in his expression cracked open, revealing a vulnerability she had only glimpsed before. "You mean that?" "With everything I am. Then marry me." The words came out rough, urgent. "Not someday, not eventually, soon as we can arrange it, because I have spent 32 years on this earth and I have never felt for anyone what I feel for you, and I do not want to waste another day not calling you my wife." Joy burst through Nora's chest like sunlight. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Hank kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Nora kissed him back with all the love she had been holding inside. When they finally broke apart, both of them were laughing, giddy with the enormity of what they had just decided. "We should tell Sarah," Nora said, still wrapped in his arms. "She's been suspecting something for weeks, I think." "We will ride down tomorrow and tell her together. Ask her blessing. Make it proper." Hank grinned, and it transformed his usually serious face into something boyish and wonderful. "Think she will approve?" "I think she will be delighted. She has been not so subtly encouraging me to pursue you since the day I arrived." "Smart woman." They made the ride to town the next morning, arriving at the boarding house just as Sarah was serving breakfast to her residents. When she saw Hank and Nora arrive together, her eyes lit with knowing amusement. "Mr. Keller, what a pleasant surprise. Will you join us for breakfast?" "Thank you, madam, but we were hoping to speak with you privately if you have a moment." Sarah's smile grew. "Of course. Let me just finish serving and we can talk in the parlor." 10 minutes later, the three of them sat in Sarah's modest but comfortable parlor. Hank had removed his hat and was turning it nervously in his hands, which Nora found endearing. "Mrs. Montgomery, I know this might seem sudden, but I have asked your niece to marry me, and she has agreed. I am here to ask for your blessing and to assure you that I will do everything in my power to make her happy and keep her safe." Sarah looked between them, her expression thoughtful. Then she turned to Nora. "Is this truly what you want, dear? You have only known this man for a few weeks." "It is what I want," Nora said firmly. "I know it is fast, but I also know my own heart. I love him, Aunt Sarah, and I want to build a life with him. And you, Mr. Keller? Are you prepared for the reality of having a wife? It is a different thing from courting, you know. Marriage requires compromise and patience and a willingness to put another person's needs alongside your own." "I understand that, madam, and I do not make this offer lightly. I have thought long and hard about whether I had anything to offer a woman, whether my life could accommodate another person. The truth is, I never thought it could, until I met Nora. She has changed everything for me, made me realize that I do not want to spend the rest of my life alone." Sarah was quiet for a moment, studying them both. Then she smiled, reaching out to take one of Nora's hands and one of Hank's. "Then you have my blessing and my joy. I can see that you care for each other, and that is more than many couples start with. When are you thinking of having the ceremony?" "As soon as possible," Hank said, "if that is acceptable. I think we can arrange something for next week, if we work quickly. There is a minister in town, Reverend Thompson, who performs marriages, and we can hold a small celebration here at the boarding house afterward." Sarah squeezed their hands. "Welcome to the family, Mr. Keller." "Hank, please, madam. I think we are past formalities now." The next week passed in a blur of preparations. Nora had no family to invite except Sarah, and Hank had no one at all, so they decided to keep the ceremony small and simple. Sarah insisted on making a wedding dress for Nora, altering one of her own gowns from years past, and the result was simple but lovely: cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. On the morning of the wedding, Nora stood in front of the mirror in Sarah's room, hardly recognizing herself. She looked happy, she realized, truly happy for the first time since her father's illness had begun to steal him away from her. The grief was still there, would always be there, but it had been joined by joy, by hope, by love. "You look beautiful, dear," Sarah said from the doorway, her eyes suspiciously bright. "Your mother would be so proud of you." "I hope so. I wish she could be here to see this." "I think she is in her own way, and I know she would approve of Hank. He is a good man, Nora. Rough around the edges perhaps, but solid where it counts." The ceremony took place in the boarding house parlor, with a handful of Sarah's most trusted boarders as witnesses. Reverend Thompson, a kind-eyed man in his 60s, led them through the traditional vows. When it came time for Hank to place the ring on Nora's finger, a simple gold band he had fashioned himself from his own gold dust, his hands shook slightly. "I, Hank Keller, take you, Nora Sinclair, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." Nora repeated the words back to him, her voice strong and clear, and when the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Hank's kiss was tender and sweet and full of promise. The celebration afterward was modest, but heartfelt. Sarah had prepared a feast, and the boarders toasted the new couple with cider and whiskey. Nora found herself laughing more than she had in years, wrapped in the warmth of community and love. As evening fell, Hank helped her into his wagon, her few belongings already loaded, and they made the journey up to his cabin. Their cabin now, under a sky blazing with stars. Inside, Hank had done his best to make the space welcoming. Fresh flowers sat on the rough-hewn table, and the bed was made up with clean linens. He had even hung curtains on the windows, simple fabric but carefully done. "It is not much," he said, sounding almost shy. "But it is ours now. We can make improvements over time, add on rooms when we need them." "It is perfect," Nora assured him, turning to face him. They were married now, truly married, and the full reality of it was just beginning to sink in. "Hank, I am nervous." "So am I." He cupped her face gently. "But we will figure it out together. We do not have to rush anything. We have all the time in the world." But despite his words, when he kissed her, the hunger was there, held carefully in check but unmistakable. Nora felt it answer in her own body, a pull that was both exciting and terrifying. "I want this," she whispered against his lips. "I want you. I'm just not sure what to do." "I will show you. We will go slow." His voice was rough with need, but his hands were gentle as they began to work at the buttons of her dress. "If anything does not feel right, you tell me, and we stop. This is about both of us, Nora, not just me." What followed was awkward and sweet, and ultimately transcendent in a way Nora had never imagined. Hank was patient, taking his time to make sure she was ready, that she was comfortable. And when they finally came together as husband and wife, the brief pain was swallowed up in the intimacy of it, the wonder of being that close to another person. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Nora's head on Hank's chest, listening to the steady thump of his heart. "I love you," she said softly. "I know I have not said it enough, but I do. I love you so much it frightens me sometimes." "I love you too." His arms tightened around her. "I did not think I was capable of this anymore, of feeling this way about another person. You gave that back to me, Nora. You gave me a reason to want a future instead of just surviving day to day." "We will build a good life here," Nora said, certainty flowing through her. "I can feel it. This is where we are meant to be. Together. Always together." The autumn gave way to winter, and Nora learned what it meant to live in the mountains. The snow came early and heavy, sometimes trapping them in the cabin for days at a time. But Hank had prepared well, laying in supplies of food and firewood, and Nora found that she did not mind being snowed in. It gave her time with her husband, long evenings by the fire where they talked and read and made love, learning each other's bodies and hearts in equal measure. Hank taught her how to shoot, insisting that she needed to know how to protect herself when he was working the mine. He taught her to recognize animal tracks in the snow, to predict the weather by the behavior of the birds, to preserve meat and vegetables for the long winter months. In turn, Nora brought a warmth to the cabin that had been missing before. She sewed curtains and made quilts, cooked meals that were more elaborate than Hank's usual simple fare, and filled the space with the small comforts that turned a shelter into a home. She even started a small garden plot, planning for the spring, dreaming of fresh vegetables and herbs. Christmas came, and they celebrated alone, exchanging simple gifts. Hank gave her a book of poetry he had ordered from back east, knowing how much she loved to read. Nora gave him a new shirt she had sewn herself, the stitches small and precise. They were small tokens, but precious because of what they represented, the desire to know each other, to bring joy to each other's lives. As January arrived and the new year of 1877 began, Nora started to suspect that she might be pregnant. Her monthly courses had not come, and she felt different, her breasts tender, her appetite changing. She waited another few weeks to be sure before telling Hank, wanting to give him the news as a certainty rather than a possibility. When she finally told him one evening over supper, his face went through a rapid succession of emotions, shock, fear, and then overwhelming joy. "A baby," he repeated, as if he could not quite believe it. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be. I have all the signs my mother described when she talked about carrying me. We are going to have a child, Hank." He was out of his chair in an instant, pulling her into his arms and holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. A child. Our child. When he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I never thought I would have this, a family of my own. You keep giving me things I never dared to hope for." "We will be good parents," Nora said firmly, though she felt her own share of fear at the responsibility. "We will love this child and raise it well." "Damn right we will." The winter seemed longer after that, Nora eager for spring to come so she could see Sarah, so she could start preparing in earnest for the baby's arrival. Hank became even more protective, insisting she not overwork herself, doing all the heavy lifting and most of the outdoor chores. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," Nora protested more than once. "I know, but humor me. I cannot help it if I want to take care of you." When the snow finally began to melt in March, Hank took Nora down to town so she could visit with Sarah and see if there was a doctor who could confirm the pregnancy and help when her time came. The doctor, a gruff but competent man named Jameson, examined her and declared that she was indeed expecting, likely due in late summer. "You are healthy and strong," he told her. "I do not foresee any problems, but I want you to come see me monthly until the birth. We will make sure everything is progressing as it should." Sarah was overjoyed at the news, immediately beginning to knit blankets and sew baby clothes. "A great niece or nephew. Oh, Nora, I'm so happy for you both." As spring progressed into summer, Nora's belly grew, and with it, her excitement and nervousness about becoming a mother. Hank talked to the baby constantly, his big hands gentle on her swelling stomach, telling their child about the mountains, about the life they would build together. "I hope it is a boy," he confessed one night as they lay in bed. "A son to teach everything I know, to carry on after I am gone. And if it is a girl, then I will love her just as fiercely and probably spoil her rotten." He grinned. "But I will also teach her to shoot and track and survive in the wilderness, because no daughter of mine is going to be helpless." August arrived hot and dry, and Nora felt ungainly and uncomfortable, ready for the baby to come. When the pains started one evening, 3 weeks before she was due, Hank immediately went into a controlled panic, hitching up the wagon to take her to town. "It's all right," Nora tried to assure him between contractions. "First babies usually take a long time. We have hours yet." But the baby had other ideas. By the time they were halfway to town, the contractions were coming fast and hard, and Nora knew with certainty that they were not going to make it. "Hank, we need to stop. The baby is coming now." "What?" "No, we are almost there. Just hold on." "Hank?" She gripped his arm hard enough to bruise. "The baby is coming now. Pull over before I have our child in the back of a moving wagon." He pulled the horses to a stop so fast they nearly reared, then was at her side in an instant, helping her out of the wagon and spreading blankets on the ground. His face was white with fear, but his hands were steady. "Tell me what to do. Just be here. Help me through this." The birth was hard and fast and terrifying. Nora had helped with enough farm animals to have a general idea of what to expect, but nothing could have truly prepared her for the reality of it. Through it all, Hank was there, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering words of encouragement and love. And then, as the sun set over the Nevada mountains, their son came into the world with a lusty cry that echoed across the desert. Hank caught him with shaking hands, wrapping him in a clean blanket and placing him on Nora's chest. "A boy," he said, his voice breaking. "We have a son." Nora looked down at the tiny red-faced creature in her arms and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. "He is perfect. Look at him, Hank. We made this." "You did this. You are incredible." Hank kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you so much. Thank you for giving me this, for giving me everything." They stayed there for a while, the three of them wrapped together under the emerging stars, before Hank helped Nora and the baby back into the wagon and drove carefully the rest of the way to town. Dr. Jameson checked them both over and declared them healthy, if a bit dramatic in their timing. Sarah came immediately, cooing over her great-nephew and fussing over Nora. "What will you name him?" Nora and Hank exchanged a look. They had discussed names, but never quite settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Hank spoke. "Henry James Keller. After my father and Nora's, both men who deserved better than they got in life." "Henry?" Nora tested the name and found it fit. "Yes, that is perfect." They stayed in town for a week while Nora recovered her strength and then returned to their cabin in the mountains, a family of 3 now instead of 2. Henry was a good baby, content to sleep and eat and be held by his parents. Hank was besotted with him, holding him for hours while Nora rested, singing the same sad songs he had once sung alone in the night. But the songs did not sound quite so sad anymore, not when they were for his son. The years flowed by like water, each one bringing changes and growth. Henry grew from a baby to a toddler to a young boy, curious and bright and full of energy. He had Nora's dark hair and a Hank's gray-green eyes, and he loved the mountains as much as his father did. When Henry was 3, Nora became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier, the birth smoother. They welcomed a daughter into the world in the spring of 1881, a tiny girl with Hank's stubborn chin and Nora's bright eyes. "What do we call her?" Hank asked, gazing at his daughter with the same wonder he had shown Henry. "Elizabeth," Nora said, "after your mother. You told me once she was the kindest woman you ever knew. I want our daughter to carry that legacy." Hank's eyes filled with tears, and he nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When he found his voice, it was rough with emotion. "She would have loved you. Would have loved both of you. I wish she could have met you." "Tell her about me," Nora suggested gently. "Tell Elizabeth all the stories about her grandmother as she grows. That way, she will know her." And he did. As the children grew, Hank told them stories of the grandmother they had never met, of the grandfather Nora remembered with both love and sorrow. He told them about the war, age-appropriate versions that spoke of bravery and loss without dwelling on the horror. He taught them to read the land, to respect the wilderness, to be strong and kind in equal measure. Nora taught them letters and numbers, read to them from the precious books she collected whenever they made trips to town. She taught them to cook and sew, to preserve food and tend a garden. She taught them that hard work was worthy, but that gentleness was not weakness. The claim continued to produce enough silver to keep them comfortable, and Hank hired a few men to help with the more dangerous mining work, allowing him to spend more time with his growing family. They added on to the cabin, creating separate rooms for the children, expanding the main living space. Sarah visited when she could, growing older but no less sharp, delighting in her great-nieces and nephews. She sold the boarding house in 1883, tired of the work, and for a while they convinced her to come live with them in the mountains. But Sarah was a town woman at heart, and after a year she moved back to Pioche, into a small cottage where she could be near her friends and the bustle she loved. When Henry was 10 and Elizabeth was 7, Nora gave birth to their third and final child, another boy they named Thomas. Hank joked that they were building their own army, but the joy in his eyes was unmistakable. 3 children, he marveled one night, watching Thomas sleep in his cradle while the older children played outside in the fading light. "Sometimes I cannot believe this is my life." "Do you ever regret it?" Nora asked, leaning against his shoulder. "Giving up your solitude for the chaos of a family?" "Not for one single second." He kissed the top of her head. "You gave me a life, Nora, a real life, full and rich and messy and perfect. I did not even know I was just existing before I met you. Now I am living, truly living, and it is more than I ever dreamed possible." "I feel the same way. When I was caught in that quicksand, I thought my life was over, but really, it was just beginning. You pulled me out of more than just the sand that day, Hank. You pulled me into the life I was always meant to have." The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Henry grew tall and strong like his father, taking to mining and mountain life with natural ease. Elizabeth was bright and spirited, equally comfortable with a book or a rifle, refusing to be limited by anyone's expectations of what a girl should be. Thomas was the quiet one, observant and thoughtful, with a gift for drawing that surprised them all. In 1888, when Nora was 35 and Hank 44, they received word that Sarah had passed away peacefully in her sleep. The news hit them hard, the loss of the woman who had been mother and grandmother and friend. They buried her in the Pioche cemetery, and Nora wept for the aunt she had come to love so dearly. But life continued, as it always did. The children grew into young adults, each finding their own path. Henry eventually took over the mining operation, expanding it with new techniques and equipment. Elizabeth, to no one's surprise, became a teacher, opening a small school in Pioche for miners' children. Thomas moved to San Francisco to study art, though he came home often, never truly happy away from the mountains. Hank and Nora grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. His hair turned silver, and her dark locks developed threads of gray, but to each other they were always the people they had been that day by the creek, when a rope had connected them and changed the course of both their lives. On their 20th anniversary, Hank took Nora back to the spot where he had pulled her from the quicksand. It was winter, and the creek bed was frozen, safe and solid. "I come here sometimes," he confessed, standing with his arm around her waist, "when I need to remind myself how lucky I am. I think about what would have happened if I had taken a different route that day, if I had not seen you in time. How easily I could have missed the best thing that ever happened to me." "But you did not," Nora said firmly. "You were exactly where you were supposed to be, exactly when you were supposed to be there, and so was I. We were meant to find each other, Hank. I believe that with everything I am." "So do I." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Thank you for saying yes that day, for being brave enough to ride up to my cabin, for choosing this life with me. Thank you for our children, our home, our love. Thank you for everything, Nora." "Thank you for saving me," she replied, tears streaming down her cheeks. "In every way a person can be saved." They kissed there by the frozen creek. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life beyond anything either had dared to dream. The years rolled on into the new century, bringing automobiles and telephones and all manner of changes to the world. But in the mountains of Nevada, Hank and Nora's life remained much the same, rooted in the land and in each other. Their grandchildren came, boisterous and beloved, filling the cabin with laughter and noise during visits. Hank taught them the same lessons he had taught his own children, passing down the knowledge of the wilderness and the importance of family. Nora told them stories, baked them cookies, and loved them with the fierce devotion that had always been her hallmark. When Hank died in 1910 at the age of 66, it was peacefully, in his sleep, with Nora's hand in his. He had lived long enough to see his children grown and settled, to hold his grandchildren, to know that the legacy he left behind was one of love and strength. Nora grieved him deeply, but not desperately. They had been married for 33 years, and she had no regrets, nothing left unsaid between them. She knew with absolute certainty that she had been loved completely, and that she had loved just as completely in return. She lived another 12 years, dying in 1922 at the age of 69. Her children and grandchildren surrounded her at the end, and her last words were of Hank, of the day he had thrown her that rope and changed everything. They buried her next to him in the small cemetery, overlooking their mountain claim, their headstones side by side for eternity. And if sometimes, in the quiet of the evening, people claimed to hear a man's voice singing in the hills, accompanied by a woman's soft laughter, well, that was just the mountains keeping their secrets, as they always had. The story of Hank and Nora became family legend, passed down through generations. The cabin still stood, maintained by their descendants, a reminder of the love that had started with a rope and a rescue and had grown into something that transcended time itself. They had lived hard and loved harder, two souls who had found each other in the wild country and had chosen to build something beautiful in the harshness. Their children carried their strength, their grandchildren carried their stories, and their great-grandchildren carried their names, ensuring that the legacy of the mountain man and the woman he saved from the quicksand would never be forgotten. In the end, it was a simple story, the kind that played out countless times across the American West during those rough, tumultuous years. A chance meeting, a helping hand extended, a love that grew from gratitude into something far more profound. But for Hank and Nora, for their family and all who came after, it was everything. It was the foundation upon which generations were built, the proof that even in the hardest places, beauty could grow, love could flourish, and two people could find in each other a home more permanent than any structure of wood and stone. The mountains still stand, enduring and eternal, keeping watch over the ground where Hank and Nora rest. And somewhere in those hills, if you listen carefully on quiet evenings, you might still hear the echo of their love story, carried on the wind like a song that refuses to end, a testament to the truth that some bonds are stronger than death, some loves are truly forever, and some rescues save more than just a life. They save a soul and create a legacy that time itself cannot erase. Their story began with quicksand and a rope, with fear and salvation. But it became something far greater. A marriage that weathered every storm, a family that grew strong and true, a love that proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected moments. Hank Keller pulled Nora Sinclair from the earth that day, in September 1876. But in truth, they saved each other. Two lost souls who found in each other the missing piece that made them whole. And in the cabin that still stands in the Nevada mountains, in the stories told around dinner tables, in the photographs carefully preserved in family albums, in the values passed down from parent to child across the generations, Hank and Nora live on, their love story a beacon of hope and proof that true love, when found and nurtured and cherished, can indeed last forever and beyond, creating ripples that extend far past the lives of those who first fell into its sweet embrace.